Он на тебя это летит так. Призываем его. Ебать,
Да сдохни ты уже, черт! Нихера себе у него лут, Арик!
ты бы видел, как это со стороны выглядит?
In the heart of a sprawling metropolis, where skyscrapers pierced the clouds and luxury cars lined the streets, there lived a man whose name was whispered in boardrooms and gossip circles alike. Alexander Grant, the enigmatic billionaire CEO of Grant Industries, had built an empire on innovation and ruthless ambition. Known for his sharp mind, cold demeanor, and an almost legendary disinterest in personal relationships, he was a figure shrouded in mystery. Rumors swirled about him. Some said he despised women after a bitter betrayal years ago. Others claimed he simply didn't have time for love amidst his relentless pursuit of success. But what no one could have predicted was that this aloof titan would find himself undone by someone as ordinary as they come. A new maid who walked into his life with nothing but determination and a quiet strength. Emma Carter wasn't looking for fairy tales or grand adventures when she took the job at Alexander's estate. Life hadn't been kind to her, raised in a small town. She'd left behind broken dreams and mounting debts to seek work in the city. What she wanted most was stability, a chance to build something solid out of the chaos her life had become. She never imagined stepping foot into the opulent world of Alexander Grant, let alone becoming entangled in its web. From the moment she entered his pristine mansion, filled with marble floors and priceless art, Emma felt like an outsider. Yet, beneath her nerves lay a resolve to prove herself worthy of even this humble position. Little did she know, fate had other plans, not just for her career, but for her heart. The first encounter between Alexander and Emma was anything never short of awkward. He barely acknowledged her presence during their brief meeting, brushing past her with the same indifference he reserved for everyone else. To him, she was just another employee, easily replaceable like all the others before her. But Emma noticed things about him that others overlooked: the faint lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched whenever someone mentioned personal matters, and the loneliness that seemed to radiate from him despite being surrounded by wealth and power. It intrigued her, though she couldn't explain why. For his part, Alexander found himself inexplicably irritated by her. There was something about her calm demeanor and unshakable focus that unsettled him, as if she saw through the carefully constructed walls he'd spent years building. As days turned into weeks, their interactions remained minimal, yet charged with an undeniable tension. Emma went about her duties diligently, ensuring every corner of the mansion gleamed under her care. Meanwhile, Alexander buried himself in work, often retreating to his study late at night, oblivious to how much attention his new maid paid to the smallest details of his routine. He noticed, however, that the house felt different, somehow less sterile, more alive. The flowers on the dining table were fresher, the air smelled cleaner, and there was an odd warmth creeping into spaces that had long felt cold. At first, he dismissed it as coincidence, but deep down, he knew better. Something, or rather, someone was changing the atmosphere of his fortress-like home. One evening, as rain lashed against the windows and lightning illuminated the darkened sky, Alexander found himself unable to concentrate on the documents spread across his desk. Frustrated, he stepped out of his study, only to see Emma kneeling by the fireplace in the living room, attempting to light it. Her hair was tied back, loosely, stray strands framing her face as she muttered softly to herself, clearly struggling with the stubborn logs. Against his will, Alexander felt a flicker of curiosity and perhaps something more. Before he could stop himself, he called out, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Startled, Emma turned to look at him. Her cheeks flushed from exertion. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither spoke. It was then that Alexander realized she wasn't afraid of him, not like everyone else, and that unnerved him more than he cared to admit. Their accidental conversation that night marked the beginning of something neither of them expected. Alexander, usually so guarded, found himself asking questions about her background, her reasons for taking the job, her thoughts on trivial things like books and music. Emma answered honestly, her responses tinged with humor and insight that caught him off guard. In return, she dared to ask him questions too, though cautiously aware of how prickly he could be. Slowly but surely, cracks began to appear in the armor he wore so proudly. He started lingering in rooms where she worked, making excuses to check on tasks that didn't need checking. She in turn grew bolder, leaving cups of tea on his desk when he worked late, knowing full well he wouldn't dismiss her outright. But change rarely comes without resistance, and theirs was no exception. Word of their unusual dynamic reached the ears of Alexander's inner circle, his stern assistant, his skeptical business partners, and even the tabloids hungry for any scrap of scandal involving his name. Whispers grew louder, accusations flew, and Emma found herself facing hostility from people who resented her presence in Alexander's orbit. Some accused her of manipulating him, while others laughed at the absurdity of a billionaire falling for someone like her. Through it all, Emma stood firm, refusing to let their judgment define her. Still, doubt crept into her mind. Was she foolish to believe anything real could blossom between them? Could a man like Alexander ever truly let go of his past? Alexander, meanwhile, wrestled with demons of his own. Memories of betrayal haunted him, fueling his fear of vulnerability. Every step he took toward Emma felt like walking a tightrope, each movement fraught with the possibility of falling. Yet, the more time he spent with her, the harder it became to deny the pull she had on him. She challenged him in ways no one else dared, forcing him to confront parts of himself he'd buried long ago. One afternoon, as they shared a rare moment of laughter over a spilled tray of coffee, Alexander felt something stir within him, a warmth, a spark, a longing he hadn't felt in years. It terrified him, but it also gave him hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, he deserved happiness after all. The turning point came unexpectedly during a charity gala hosted at Alexander's estate. Dressed in a simple yet elegant gown borrowed from a friend, Emma attended not as staff but as Alexander's guest, a decision that sent shockwaves through the attendees. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as they watched the billionaire CEO escort her to the dance floor, his hand resting lightly on her waist. For the first time, Emma saw glimpses of the man behind the mask, the man who smiled genuinely, who laughed freely, who looked at her as though she were the only person in the room. And Alexander, he saw beauty in her resilience, courage in her quiet grace, and a future he hadn't dared to dream of until now yet. Just as the night seemed perfect, disaster struck. A reporter cornered Emma during a break, firing invasive questions about her relationship with Alexander. Caught off guard, she stumbled over her words, inadvertently confirming suspicions that had been brewing for weeks. The fallout was immediate. Cameras flashed, headlines screamed, and Alexander's phone buzzed incessantly with calls from furious stakeholders demanding answers. As the chaos unfolded around them, Emma realized the magnitude of what she'd unleashed. Panic gripped her chest as she searched for Alexander in the crowd, needing to explain, to apologize, to make things right. But when she finally found him, his expression stopped her cold. Gone was the warmth from earlier. In its place was a mask of icy detachment. Without a word, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the wreckage of their fragile connection. The days that followed were agonizing. Alexander retreated into his shell, canceling meetings, ignoring calls, and avoiding Emma entirely. She tried reaching out, leaving notes, knocking on his study door, but he refused to acknowledge her existence. The mansion, once vibrant with tentative hope, fell silent again, suffocating under the weight of unresolved tension. Emma wrestled with guilt, wondering if she'd misread everything, if her presence had only complicated his life further. But, even as doubt consumed her, a stubborn part of her refused to give up. She remembered the way he'd looked at her during the gala, the tenderness in his touch, the promise in his gaze. That couldn't have been a lie, could it? Determined to fight for what they'd started, Emma made a decision, one that would either mend their fractured bond or tear it apart forever. Little did she know, Alexander was grappling with his own turmoil. Locked away in his study, he replayed the events of the gala over and over in his mind, torn between anger and regret. Anger at the world for intruding on something so private, so precious. Regret for pushing Emma away when she needed him most. He hated feeling vulnerable, hated the idea of losing control. Yet here he was, undone by a woman who challenged everything he thought he knew about love and trust. As he stared out the window at the city skyline, a question gnawed at him. Could he risk opening his heart again, or was it safer to let her go before she broke it completely? Unbeknownst to both of them, forces beyond their control were converging, threatening to upend their lives once more. A rival businessman, eager to exploit the scandal for his gain, began digging into Emma's past, uncovering secrets she'd fought hard to bury. Meanwhile, whispers of a hostile takeover loomed over Grant Industries, putting pressure on Alexander to maintain his ironclad image. The stage was set for a confrontation. Neither of them was prepared for a clash that would test the strength of their bond and force them to confront truths they'd rather ignore. As the storm gathered momentum, Emma and Alexander stood on opposite sides of a precipice, unsure whether they'd leap together or fall apart. Emma's life before walking into Alexander's mansion was a patchwork of struggles and quiet resilience. Growing up in the small town of Willow Creek, she had learned early on that dreams often came with a price tag too steep to afford. Her father, a mechanic with a heart bigger than his wallet, worked tirelessly to keep food on the table after her mother passed away when Emma was just 10. The loss left a void in her childhood, but it also taught her the value of strength and perseverance. By the time she graduated high school, Emma knew she wanted more for herself and for her father, but college loans and mounting bills quickly turned her aspirations into burdens. When her father fell ill and needed expensive treatment, Emma made the difficult decision to leave her half-finished degree behind and move to the city, hoping to find work that could support them both. The transition wasn't easy. The city was overwhelming, its pace relentless, its people indifferent. She took whatever jobs she could find, waitressing at dingy diners, cleaning offices late into the night, even babysitting for families who barely noticed her existence. Each paycheck stretched thinner than the last, Yet Emma refused to give up. She clung to the belief that hard work would eventually pay off, even if the odds seemed stacked against her. That determination led her to apply for the position at Alexander's estate, though she never imagined stepping into such an opulent world. What started as a means to survive soon became something more, a chance to prove not only to others but to herself that she was capable of thriving despite the challenges life threw her way. For Alexander, the weight of his past loomed larger than the empire he had built. Born into privilege, he grew up under the shadow of his father, a ruthless industrialist who believed affection was a weakness and success the only measure of worth. From a young age, Alexander learned to suppress emotions, channeling every ounce of energy into excelling at everything he did. But it wasn't until his 20s, during a brief but devastating relationship, that his mistrust of women solidified. Sarah, his fiancée at the time, had betrayed him in ways that cut deeper than any business deal gone wrong. Not only had she leaked confidential company information to a competitor, but she'd done so while pretending to love him. The betrayal shattered something inside Alexander, leaving him convinced that vulnerability was a liability he couldn't afford. His rise to becoming CEO of Grant Industries was meteoric, fueled by brilliance and an unyielding drive to outperform everyone around him. Yet, beneath the polished exterior lay a man haunted by loneliness. He surrounded himself with people who admired his power but feared his temper, creating a bubble where genuine connection was impossible. Over the years, rumors spread about his disdain for women. Though few understood the truth, he didn't dislike them. He simply didn't trust them. His wealth and influence became shields, protecting him from the pain of intimacy. Until Emma arrived, disrupting the carefully curated isolation he'd constructed. Her presence forced him to confront feelings he'd buried long ago, feelings that terrified him almost as much as they intrigued him. As tensions simmered between them following the gala debacle, external forces began closing in. Victor Lang, a rival businessman with a reputation for ruthlessness, saw an opportunity in the scandal surrounding Alexander and Emma. Lang had been trying to acquire Grant Industries for years, viewing it as the final piece in his corporate empire. The media frenzy provided the perfect opening to exploit weaknesses in Alexander's leadership. With whispers of instability swirling, Lang launched a covert campaign to destabilize the company from within, planting seeds of doubt among shareholders and employees alike. For Lang, the maid-turned-paramour drama wasn't just gossip, it was ammunition. Meanwhile, Lang's private investigators dug deeper into Emma's background, uncovering details that painted her in a suspicious light. They discovered old debts, unpaid medical bills, and a series of odd jobs that raised eyebrows. While none of it was illegal, it was enough to cast doubt on her intentions. Was she truly just a maid seeking stability, or was there more to her story? Lang wasted no time leaking snippets of this information to sympathetic reporters, ensuring the narrative shifted to one of manipulation and deceit. Headlines screamed about the gold-digging maid and questioned whether Alexander's judgment was clouded by infatuation. The pressure mounted, forcing Alexander to make decisions that would either protect his legacy or risk losing everything, including Emma. Back at the mansion, Emma felt the walls closing in. Every news alert on her phone brought fresh waves of anxiety, each article harsher than the last. She tried to focus on her duties, scrubbing floors and dusting shelves with mechanical precision, but her mind kept drifting back to Alexander. Why hadn't he reached out? Did he believe the lies being printed about her? Or worse, had he decided she wasn't worth the trouble? The uncertainty gnawed at her, making sleep elusive and turning meals into chores she barely registered. Still, amidst the turmoil, a stubborn resolve burned within her. If Alexander wouldn't come to her, then she would go to him, even if it meant risking rejection. One evening, unable to bear the silence any longer, Emma knocked on the door of Alexander's study. There was no answer, but she knew he was inside. She'd seen the faint glow of his desk lamp through the crack beneath the door. Taking a deep breath, she pushed it open slightly, peeking inside. Alexander sat hunched over a stack of papers, his face pale and drawn, dark circles underlining his eyes. He looked up sharply, startled by the intrusion, and for a moment, their gazes locked. Emma hesitated, unsure whether to speak or retreat. Before she could decide, Alexander broke the silence, his voice low and strained. "What do you want, Emma?" It wasn't hostile, but it wasn't welcoming either. Just wary. "I wanted to explain," she began, stepping fully into the room. "About the other night, I didn't mean to cause trouble, I thought." Her voice faltered as she searched for the right words. "I thought maybe we were building something real." Alexander leaned back in his chair, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Real? Do you have any idea what's happening out there because of us? My company is under siege, my reputation is in shambles, and everywhere I turn, people are questioning my sanity for letting you get close." His tone was bitter, laced with frustration, but there was a flicker of something else beneath the surface. Pain. Emma swallowed hard, refusing to let his anger deter her. "I know things look bad, but none of this changes who I am or why I'm here. You can ask me anything, dig into my past all you want, I've got nothing to hide. But don't push me away because you're scared." Her words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. Alexander stared at her, conflicted. Part of him wanted to believe her, to trust that she was different from everyone else who'd ever tried to use him. But another part, the part shaped by years of betrayal and disappointment, whispered warnings in his ear. Trusting her meant risking everything, and yet pushing her away felt like losing a part of himself he hadn't realized he needed until now. Before either of them could say more, the sound of the front doorbell echoed through the mansion. Both froze, the interruption breaking the fragile tension between them. Alexander rose abruptly, muttering something about seeing who it was, and left the room without another word. Emma stood there, rooted to the spot, her heart pounding. Whatever awaited them beyond that door, she sensed it wouldn't be good. And as footsteps approached, growing louder with each second, she braced herself for what might come next. When Alexander returned moments later, his expression confirmed her worst fears. In his hand, he held an envelope, its contents clearly disturbing. Without a word, he handed it to her, watching as she opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were photos, grainy but unmistakably with her father's hospital records, her old apartment in disrepair, and notes detailing her financial struggles. Someone had pieced together her vulnerabilities and weaponized them, twisting her hardships into evidence of ulterior motives. Emma's stomach churned as she realized the implications. This wasn't just about ruining her reputation, it was about destroying her completely. Alexander watched her reaction closely, searching for any sign of deception. But all he saw was shock, hurt, and a quiet fury that matched his own. "Who sent this?" she demanded, her voice shaking with barely contained rage. "I don't know yet," he admitted, his jaw tightening. "But whoever it is, they're playing a dangerous game." He paused, his gaze softening slightly. "Emma, I need to know, are you hiding anything from me?" The question stung, not because it was unfair, but because it highlighted the fragility of the trust they'd begun to build. Emma met his eyes, her own blazing with conviction. "No, Alexander, I'm not. Whoever is doing this wants to tear us apart, and we can't let them win." For the first time in days, Alexander allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she was telling the truth. But even as that thought crossed his mind, the reality of their situation hit him like a freight train. They were standing on the edge of a precipice, and one wrong move could send them plummeting into chaos. The envelope with the damning photos became a haunting presence in the mansion. Tucked away in Alexander's study but impossible to forget, it lingered like a shadow over every interaction between him and Emma, a constant reminder of the forces conspiring against them. For Emma, it was more than just an invasion of privacy, it was a calculated attack on her dignity, her past, and the fragile trust she'd worked so hard to build with Alexander. Each time she thought about the photos, anger bubbled inside her, not just at whoever had orchestrated this smear campaign, but also at herself for feeling powerless. How could she fight something she couldn't even see? Alexander, meanwhile, wrestled with his own demons. The photos were proof that someone had been watching Emma closely, perhaps even before she entered his life. That realization gnawed at him, planting seeds of paranoia he couldn't shake. Was this person targeting her because of him, or was there something else, something deeper that tied her to all of this? He hated himself for doubting her, especially after the raw honesty she'd shown when confronted. Yet, years of conditioning made it hard to silence the voice whispering warnings in his mind. His father's lessons echoed in his head. Everyone has an angle. Everyone wants something. But what if Emma didn't? What if she was exactly who she claimed to be, a woman trying to survive in a world that often punished kindness? As days passed, the tension between them grew thicker, punctuated by stolen glances and loaded silences. Emma threw herself into her work, scrubbing floors and polishing furniture with a fervor that bordered on obsessive. She needed the distraction, a way to channel the storm brewing inside her. Alexander too buried himself in meetings and strategy sessions, though his focus wavered constantly. Every email alert, every phone call felt like another potential threat looming over them. The once pristine mansion now carried an air of unease, its grandeur overshadowed by the weight of unresolved questions. Meanwhile, Victor Lang watched from the sidelines, pleased with how smoothly his plan was unfolding. The media frenzy had done its job, sowing doubt among Grant Industries stakeholders and casting Emma as a manipulative opportunist. But Lang wasn't satisfied yet. He knew that breaking Alexander personally would be far more satisfying than simply dismantling his company. To do that, he needed to dig deeper, to find the cracks in their relationship and widen them until they shattered completely. So, he instructed his team to keep digging, to uncover anything, even the smallest detail that could tip the scales in his favor. Back at the mansion, a subplot began to emerge through the eyes of Margaret Hensley, Alexander's longtime housekeeper and confidant. Margaret had served the Grants for decades, loyal to the family despite their flaws. She'd seen Alexander grow from a brooding teenager into the guarded man he was today, and she'd always believed he deserved happiness. When Emma arrived, Margaret sensed a change in him almost immediately, the way his shoulders relaxed slightly when she was near, the rare smiles that crept onto his face without warning. At first, she dismissed it as coincidence, but now she saw it clearly. Emma mattered to him, and that meant she mattered to Margaret too. Margaret decided to take matters into her own hands. One afternoon, while Emma was tending to the garden, Margaret approached her with a tray of tea and sandwiches. "You look like you could use a break," she said warmly, setting the tray down on a nearby bench. Emma hesitated before joining her, unsure of what to say. The older woman's kindness caught her off guard. In recent days, everyone else seemed to view her with suspicion or disdain. "I know things are tough right now," Margaret continued, pouring 2 cups of tea. "But I've known Mr. Grant a long time, and I can tell he cares about you. Don't give up on him, not yet." Emma stared at her, tears welling up in her eyes. "It's not just about giving up," she admitted softly. "I feel like no matter what I do, someone is waiting to tear it all apart. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to work here to make a life for myself. Now everything feels ruined." Margaret reached out, placing a reassuring hand on Emma's arm. "Sometimes, life throws us curveballs we don't expect, but you're stronger than you think, and so is he. If you both want this badly enough, you'll find a way through." Though Margaret's words offered comfort, they also highlighted the enormity of the challenge ahead. Emma realized that fighting back wouldn't be easy. It might mean confronting not only external enemies but also the doubts festering within themselves. Still, as she returned to her tasks later that day, a spark of determination reignited within her. She wouldn't let fear dictate her future. At the same time, another subplot unfolded in the form of Daniel Reed, one of Grant Industries' senior executives. Daniel had climbed the corporate ladder alongside Alexander, earning his respect through loyalty and competence. However, beneath his polished exterior lay ambition and resentment. He'd always envied Alexander's natural charisma and leadership, qualities that came effortlessly to him but eluded Daniel despite years of effort. Now, with the scandal rocking the company, Daniel saw an opportunity to seize control. While publicly supporting Alexander, he secretly fed information to Victor Lang, hoping to accelerate the downfall of the man he viewed as both mentor and rival. Daniel's betrayal added another layer of complexity to the unfolding drama. Unbeknownst to Alexander, some of the leaks plaguing the company originated from within his inner circle. Trust, already fragile, began to erode further. Employees whispered in hallways, unsure whom to believe or where their allegiances should lie. Even those who remained loyal to Alexander found themselves questioning whether he was capable of leading the company through such turmoil. For Emma, the situation worsened when reporters started showing up outside the mansion gates, eager for a glimpse of the mystery made at the center of the scandal. Their cameras flashed incessantly, capturing images of her coming and going, turning her daily routine into a spectacle. Neighbors speculated openly, some expressing sympathy, others judgment. The isolation grew suffocating, and Emma found herself retreating further into herself, avoiding eye contact and speaking only when necessary. One evening, unable to endure the scrutiny any longer, she slipped out of the mansion under the cover of darkness, seeking solace in the quiet streets of the neighborhood. As she walked aimlessly, her thoughts drifted to her father. She hadn't spoken to him in weeks, afraid of burdening him with her problems. But now, more than ever, she longed for his wisdom and reassurance. Before she could second-guess herself, she pulled out her phone and dialed his number. "Emma," his voice, weak but warm, filled her with a bittersweet mix of relief and guilt. "Is everything okay?" She hesitated, unsure where to begin. "Dad, I messed up big time," he chuckled softly. "Honey, you've always been your own worst critic. Tell me what happened." And so, she did. She told him about Alexander, about the gala, the scandal, and the envelope of photos. She confessed her fears, her frustrations, and her determination to fight back. By the time she finished, tears streamed down her face, but she felt lighter somehow, as if sharing her burden had lifted a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. "You're stronger than you think," Emma, her father, said gently. "And if this man is worth fighting for, then don't let anyone, not even yourself, convince you otherwise." Her conversation with her father renewed her resolve, but it also underscored the stakes. This wasn't just about saving her reputation or proving her innocence. It was about standing up for the truth, no matter how daunting the odds. As she made her way back to the mansion, she resolved to confront the challenges head-on, starting with the man who still held her heart. When she returned, Alexander was waiting for her in the living room, pacing anxiously. Relief washed over his face when he saw her, followed quickly by concern. "Where were you?" "I was worried. I needed some air," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "And I called my dad. He reminded me of something important. Sometimes, love requires courage, not just yours, but mine too." Alexander studied her, seeing the fire in her eyes that had drawn him to her in the first place. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could weather this storm together. But as they stood there, united yet uncertain, the sound of shattering glass from upstairs sent their hearts racing. Someone or something was in the house. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the mansion, slicing through the quiet like a blade. Emma and Alexander froze, their eyes locking in shared alarm before instinct kicked in. Without a word, Alexander moved first, grabbing a poker from beside the fireplace as he strode toward the staircase. Emma followed close behind, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear her own thoughts. Every creak of the floorboards felt deafening, every shadow seemed alive with menace. Whoever or whatever was upstairs had breached the sanctuary they'd fought so hard to protect. As they reached the second floor, the faint scent of smoke wafted toward them, mingling with the metallic temps of fear. Alexander paused outside the door to his study, his grip tightening on the poker. The room was dark, but flickers of orange light danced beneath the crack, casting eerie patterns on the walls. "Stay behind me," he whispered, his voice low and commanding, though there was no mistaking the tension threading through it. Emma nodded, clutching the edge of his shirt as if to anchor herself to something solid. He pushed the door open slowly, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, chaos reigned. Papers were scattered across the floor, cabinets yanked open, their contents strewn haphazardly. A lamp lay shattered near the window, its shards glinting ominously in the dim light. And then they saw it, a small fire smoldering in the corner, feeding greedily on torn documents. Someone had broken in not just to steal, but to destroy. Alexander cursed under his breath, rushing forward to stamp out the flames with his jacket before they could spread. Emma hovered anxiously nearby, scanning the room for signs of an intruder. But whoever had done this was already gone, leaving only destruction in their wake. "What is this?" Emma asked, her voice trembling as she picked up one of the charred pages. It was part of a financial report, marked with confidential notes scrawled in Alexander's handwriting. Her stomach churned at the implications. This wasn't random vandalism, it was targeted. Someone knew exactly what they were looking for, and they weren't afraid to burn bridges to get it. Alexander straightened, his face pale but resolute. "They're trying to dismantle everything I've built," he said grimly, his fists clenched at his sides. "Grant Industries, my reputation, us. None of it is safe anymore." Emma stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "Us? You think this is about us?" He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "Don't you see? This started because of you. Because of us. Whoever is behind this knows how much you mean to me now, and they're using that against me." Her breath caught in her throat. For weeks, she'd wondered whether being involved with Alexander was worth the cost of scrutiny, the judgment, the danger. Now, standing amidst the wreckage of his study, she realized the stakes were higher than she'd ever imagined. This wasn't just about her past or his empire. It was about survival. If they didn't figure out who was orchestrating this attack, they risked losing far more than their relationship. They risked losing themselves, determined not to let fear paralyze them. Alexander called security immediately, demanding answers. How had someone breached the mansion without triggering alarms? Why hadn't anyone noticed until it was too late? The responses he received were unsatisfactory at best. A glitch in the system here, human error there. None of it added up, and the frustration simmered beneath his skin like a live wire. Meanwhile, Emma began piecing together fragments of the destroyed documents, hoping to salvage any information that might help identify their enemy. Each fragment felt like a clue, a breadcrumb leading them closer to the truth but also deeper into peril. While they worked, another subplot unfolded outside the mansion. Victor Lang sat in his penthouse office, sipping whiskey as he reviewed photos sent by his operatives. The images showed Emma wandering alone earlier that evening, clearly distressed. Lang smirked, satisfied with how well his plan was progressing. Breaking her spirit would be key to dismantling Alexander completely. But just as he leaned back in his chair, confident in his victory, his phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Daniel Reed, offering intel on internal weaknesses within Grant Industries' leadership team. Lang's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Perhaps it was time to escalate things further. Back at the mansion, tensions escalated as well. Margaret Hensley arrived early the next morning, visibly shaken after hearing about the break-in. She brought news that chilled Emma to the bone. Several staff members had been approached by strangers asking questions about her, where she came from, what she did in her free time, even mundane details like her favorite foods. "It's like they're building a profile," Margaret said gravely, handing Emma a cup of tea. "You need to be careful, dear. This isn't over." Emma nodded numbly, feeling the walls closing in around her once again. Even the safety of the mansion felt like an illusion now, its opulence masking the vulnerabilities lurking beneath. Alexander, too, sensed the shift. His usual composure cracked under the weight of relentless attacks, both personal and professional. Board members called emergency meetings, questioning his ability to lead during such instability. Reporters camped outside the gates, eager for updates on the scandal. And through it all, Emma remained steadfast, refusing to let fear dictate her actions. One afternoon, as Emma sorted through salvaged documents in the study, she stumbled upon something unusual: a series of numbers scribbled in the margin of a page. At first glance, they appeared random, but upon closer inspection, she realized they corresponded to dates tied to major events in Alexander's life: his mother's death, the launch of Grant Industries' flagship product. The night he ended things with Sarah, someone had been marking these moments, tracking his life with eerie precision. Her blood ran cold as realization dawned. Whoever was behind this wasn't just targeting them, they were studying them, anticipating their every move. She showed the numbers to Alexander, who paled instantly. "This isn't coincidence," he muttered, pacing the room like a caged animal. "Someone has been watching us for a long time, planning this." "But who?" Emma pressed, her voice rising with desperation. "Who hates you enough to do all this?" Before he could answer, his phone rang. It was Daniel Reed, requesting an urgent meeting. Something about the tone of his voice set off warning bells in Alexander's mind. He agreed to meet him at the office later that evening, instructing Emma to stay at the mansion where she'd be safe. But as he prepared to leave, she stopped him, gripping his arm tightly. "Don't go alone," she pleaded, her eyes wide with worry. "Please, let me come with you or take security. Anything." He hesitated, torn between protecting her and confronting whatever awaited him. Finally, he relented slightly. "I'll bring extra guards, but you stay here. Promise me." Reluctantly, she nodded, though her instinct screamed that something was terribly wrong. As Alexander drove away, she watched from the window, dread pooling in her stomach. Something told her this meeting wouldn't end well, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time at the office. Alexander found Daniel waiting in his private conference room, flanked by two unfamiliar men in suits. The air was thick with unease, and Alexander's gut tightened as he took in the scene. "What's going on, Daniel?" he demanded, his voice sharp. Daniel smiled thinly, gesturing to the men beside him. "These gentlemen have an offer you can't refuse. One that will save your company and possibly your life." Alexander's heart sank. Whatever deal Daniel had brokered, it wasn't good. As the conversation unfolded, the pieces fell into place. Victor Lang's involvement, Daniel's betrayal, the orchestrated chaos designed to force Alexander's hand. By the time Alexander fully grasped the extent of the conspiracy, it was too late. The men advanced, their intentions clear. Trapped and outnumbered, Alexander braced himself for what came next, but even as fear gripped him, his thoughts turned to Emma. If he didn't make it out of this, he prayed she'd find the strength to keep fighting. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Emma waited anxiously, pacing the length of the living room. Hours passed, each tick of the clock amplifying her unease. When her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, her hands trembled as she opened it. The message contained a single line. Asterisk, "If you want to see him again, come alone." Below it was an address, a remote warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Panic surged through her veins, but so did determination. Whoever had Alexander wasn't going to win, not while she still had breath in her body. Grabbing her coat, she slipped out of the mansion unnoticed, heading into the night with nothing but courage and hope driving her forward. What awaited her at the warehouse, she didn't know. But one thing was certain. The climax of this battle was drawing near, and neither side was ready to surrender. The warehouse loomed ahead, its silhouette jagged against the moonlit sky. Emma parked her car a block away, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she tried to steady her breathing. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to call for help, to avoid walking into what could easily be a trap. But the thought of Alexander alone, outnumbered, and possibly hurt kept her feet moving forward. She grabbed her phone, snapping a quick photo of the address before turning it off. If something went wrong, at least someone might find this clue. As she approached the building, the air grew colder, heavy with the metallic scent of rust and decay. The entrance was partially ajar, revealing shadows that danced eerily in the dim light spilling from within. Her footsteps echoed on the cracked pavement, each sound amplified by the silence surrounding her. She hesitated just outside the door, heart hammering in her chest, before slipping inside. The interior was cavernous, filled with stacks of crates and machinery cloaked in dust. Somewhere deep in the space, a faint hum vibrated through the floorboards, accompanied by the occasional drip of water echoing off the walls. "Hello," she called out, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to sound strong. There was no immediate response, only the oppressive weight of stillness pressing down on her. She took another step forward, her eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. Then, suddenly, a spotlight flickered on above her, blinding her momentarily. Blinking against the harsh glare, she squinted into the gloom beyond, trying to make sense of what or who was waiting for her. "You came," a voice drawled from the shadows. It wasn't Alexander's voice. This one was smooth, calculated, dripping with malice. Victor Lang stepped into the light, flanked by two burly men whose stony expressions left little doubt about their role in whatever was unfolding. Emma's stomach churned as she recognized him instantly, the man behind the smear campaign, the orchestrator of chaos that had upended both her life and Alexander's. "What have you done with him?" she demanded, her voice shaking but defiant. "Where's Alexander?" Victor chuckled softly, circling her like a predator sizing up its prey. "Oh, he's fine for now, though I imagine he won't stay that way if you don't cooperate." Emma clenched her fists, forcing herself to remain calm. "Cooperate? With what? You've already ruined everything. What more do you want?" Victor stopped in front of her, his piercing gaze boring into hers. Everything. No, my dear, we're just getting started. See, I didn't orchestrate all of this just to take down Grant Industries or tarnish your reputation. That was merely foreplay. What I really want is control. And you, Emma, are the key to achieving it. Her blood ran cold. Me, how could that possibly matter to you? He smirked, leaning closer until his face was inches from hers. Because you're the only thing standing between Alexander and complete collapse. Without you, he's nothing, a broken man clinging to scraps of his empire. With you. He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Well, let's just say there's leverage in keeping you alive for now. Before she could respond, one of the men shoved her roughly toward a chair positioned near the center of the room. She stumbled but managed to catch herself, refusing to show weakness. As they tied her hands behind the chair, Victor gestured to a monitor set up nearby. On the screen, grainy footage played a live feed showing Alexander bound and gagged in another part of the warehouse. His face was bruised, his eyes blazing with fury even as exhaustion etched lines around them. Seeing him like that ignited a fire in Emma's chest, burning away some of her fear. You're insane, she spat, glaring at Victor. You think this will work? You think hurting him will give you power over me? Victor laughed, a low, chilling sound that reverberated through the empty space. Oh, I know it will, because unlike Alexander, you actually care about people, about him, and that makes you predictable. He leaned in again, his tone dropping to a whisper. But here's the twist, you're not the only pawn in this game anymore. At his signal, the second plot twist unfolded. From the shadows emerged Daniel Reed, his expression unreadable but tinged with guilt. Emma stared at him, disbelief crashing over her like a tidal wave. Daniel, you're working with him. Daniel avoided her gaze, shifting uncomfortably under her accusing stare. It's not personal, Emma. I did what I had to do to protect myself and the company. Protect yourself, she shot back, incredulous. You betrayed Alexander. After everything he's done for you. Victor cut in, clearly enjoying the drama. Ah, loyalty is such a fickle thing, isn't it? Especially when ambition gets involved. He turned to Daniel, his smile razor-sharp. Now, tell her the real reason you're here. For a moment, Daniel hesitated, his jaw tightening. Then, reluctantly, he spoke. There's a mole within Grant Industries, someone feeding information to Victor. I found evidence pointing to Margaret Hensley. Emma's mind reeled. Margaret, the kind, steadfast housekeeper who'd always supported her. It couldn't be true, could it? Victor seemed to read her thoughts, surprised. Oh, Margaret's been playing the long game for years. She's the one who tipped us off about your father's medical bills. Your old debt soul, those little vulnerabilities we so conveniently exploited. Turns out, she's harbored resentment toward Alexander. Ever since his father fired her husband decades ago. Revenge is sweet, isn't it? No, Emma whispered, shaking her head. She wouldn't, she couldn't. Oh, but she did, Victor purred, relishing her shock. And now, thanks to her, we have everything we need to finish this. Just then, the sound of screeching tires outside shattered the tension. Voices shouted, followed by the unmistakable thud of boots storming the building. Victor cursed under his breath, grabbing Emma by the arm and dragging her toward a side exit. Looks like your time's up, he snarled. But don't worry, we'll meet again. As they disappeared into the night, leaving chaos in their wake, Emma realized the stakes had never been higher. Whoever had arrived to police security, Ali's was too late to stop Victor's escape. And as she glanced back at the warehouse one last time, she saw flames licking at the edges of the structure, consuming everything in their path. The battle wasn't over, it was only beginning. The night air was thick with smoke as flames engulfed the warehouse, casting an orange glow across the sky. Emma struggled against Victor's grip, her mind racing to piece together what had just happened. The arrival of reinforcements, likely Alexander's private security team, had forced Victor to flee, but not before setting the building ablaze. Somewhere in the chaos, Alexander was still trapped inside, bound and unable to escape on his own. Panic surged through her veins like wildfire, but she couldn't let herself succumb to it. Not now. With a burst of adrenaline, Emma twisted violently, catching Victor off guard. His hold loosened just enough for her to wrench free. Stumbling back toward the burning structure, Alexander, she screamed, her voice cutting through the roar of the fire. Behind her, Victor shouted something unintelligible, but she didn't look back. Her focus was singular, getting to him, no matter the cost. The heat hit her like a wall as she re-entered the warehouse, coughing against the acrid smoke that stung her lungs. Visibility was nearly non-existent, but she followed the faint sound of muffled shouts coming from deeper within the building. Stumbling over debris and dodging falling beams, she pushed forward, driven by sheer willpower. Finally, she found him in a corner room, tied to a chair with ropes cutting into his wrists. His face was streaked with soot, his eyes wide with both relief and alarm when he saw her. "Emma, what are you doing here? Get out," he rasped, straining against his bonds. "Not without you," she shot back, grabbing a shard of broken glass from the floor. She worked quickly, sawing at the ropes until they snapped. As soon as he was free, Alexander pulled her close, shielding her from a collapsing beam with his body. Together they staggered toward the exit, the inferno closing in around them. They emerged into the cool night air just as emergency sirens wailed in the distance. Fire trucks screeched to a halt, their lights flashing wildly against the dark backdrop. Alexander collapsed onto the pavement, gasping for breath while Emma knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, they simply held each other, overwhelmed by the realization that they'd made it out alive. But the victory was short-lived. As paramedics rushed to tend to their injuries, a figure emerged from the shadows. Margaret Hensley. Her expression was unreadable, her hands trembling slightly as she approached them. Emma tensed, anger and betrayal simmering beneath her exhaustion. "How could you?" she demanded, her voice cracking under the weight of everything unsaid. Margaret hesitated, guilt etched into every line of her face. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she admitted softly, her voice breaking. "When I first reached out to Victor, it was only supposed to be about revenge, a way to hurt Alexander's family for ruining mine. But then I saw how much he cared about you, and I realized I'd made a terrible mistake." Before Emma or Alexander could respond, Margaret pulled a flash drive from her pocket and handed it to them. "Everything is on here, the evidence against Victor, Daniel's betrayal, all of it. Use it to take him down, please." Without another word, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. Emma stared after her, torn between fury and pity. Even as the truth sank in, there was no time to process it fully. Security teams, it swarmed the area, searching for survivors and for Victor. Though he had escaped, his operation was crumbling around him. In the days that followed, the fallout unfolded rapidly. With the contents of the flash drive exposed, Victor Lang's empire unraveled. His illegal dealings, corporate espionage, and blackmail schemes were laid bare for the world to see. Arrest warrants were issued, and though Victor himself remained elusive, his influence evaporated overnight. Daniel Reed, meanwhile, faced charges for his role in the conspiracy. His career reduced to ashes. For Emma and Alexander, the aftermath brought its own challenges. Trust, once shattered, took time to rebuild, not just between them, but within themselves. They retreated to a quiet cabin in the countryside, seeking solace away from prying eyes and relentless headlines. It was there, amidst the tranquility of nature, that they began to heal. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Emma finally voiced the question that had lingered in her mind since the night of the fire. "Do you think we'll ever really be safe? Or will people always try to tear us apart?" Alexander reached for her hand, his touch firm yet gentle. "Safe isn't the point. What matters is that we're together. No matter what happens, we'll face it together." His words brought a measure of peace, but the final twist came unexpectedly. A week later, as they prepared to return to the city, a package arrived at the cabin. Inside was a single sheet of paper bearing a cryptic message, *, "The game isn't over, watch your backs." There was no signature, no indication of who had sent it. Yet, handwriting was unmistakably familiar. It matched the note that had lured Emma to the warehouse. Fear prickled at the edges of their newfound calm, but instead of letting it consume them, they chose to stand firm. Whatever battles lay ahead, they would fight side by side. Because love, they realized, wasn't about avoiding storms, it was about weathering them together. And as they stepped back into the world, ready to rebuild their lives, they knew one thing for certain: their story was far from finished. The cryptic note lingered in their minds like a shadow they couldn't shake. Emma and Alexander returned to the city with cautious optimism, aware that life had a way of testing even the strongest bonds. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation for Alexander, now felt like a fortress, not because it kept people out, but because it sheltered what mattered most: their love and shared resilience. They decided not to dwell on the ominous message. Instead, they focused on rebuilding their lives piece by piece. Grant Industries became a cornerstone of their recovery. With Victor Lang's empire dismantled and Daniel Reed disgraced, Alexander took decisive steps to restore trust within the company. He called an emergency board meeting, addressing shareholders and employees with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "We've been through hell," he admitted, his voice steady despite the weight of his words, "but we're still standing. And we'll come back stronger than ever." To everyone's surprise, he announced sweeping changes, transparency initiatives, employee support programs, and a renewed commitment to ethical practices. For the first time in years, Alexander allowed himself to lead not just with ambition, but with heart. Employees who had doubted him began to see a different side of their CEO, one that was willing to listen, learn, and grow. Slowly but surely, the cracks in the foundation of Grant Industries began to mend. Meanwhile, Emma found her own path forward. She didn't return to her role as a maid, though she remained deeply involved in the household, working alongside Margaret Hensley when the older woman unexpectedly reappeared. Margaret had resigned from her position after the fire, disappearing for weeks before showing up at the mansion one rainy afternoon. Her face was lined with regret, but her eyes carried a quiet resolve. "I owe you both an apology," she said, simply. Standing in the doorway with soaked shoes and trembling hands, Emma and Alexander exchanged glances, unsure how to respond. But Margaret wasn't asking for forgiveness, she was offering redemption. Over tea in the kitchen, She confessed everything: her family's struggles, her bitterness toward the Grants, and the moment she realized her vendetta had spiraled out of control. "I thought I wanted revenge," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But all I did was hurt innocent people, including myself." Her honesty struck a chord with Emma, who saw parallels between Margaret's pain and her own past. Together, they forged a tentative friendship built on mutual understanding and a shared desire to move forward. Margaret stayed on as a consultant, helping oversee renovations to the estate while mentoring young staff members. It was a second chance none of them had expected, but one they all needed. As weeks turned into months, Emma and Alexander settled into a rhythm that balanced work and personal life. They spent evenings walking through the gardens, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes, they laughed until their sides ached. Other times, they sat in companionable silence, content simply to be near each other. Their relationship deepened, rooted in the trials they'd endured together. Love, they discovered, wasn't about perfection, it was about choosing each other, flaws and all. Yet, the mystery of the cryptic note continued to haunt them. Every creak of the floorboards, every unfamiliar car passing the gates, sent a shiver down their spines. Were they truly safe, or was someone still watching, waiting for the right moment to strike? The uncertainty gnawed at Alexander more than he cared to admit. He doubled security measures around the mansion and hired private investigators to trace the origin of the note, but no leads surfaced, leaving them trapped in limbo. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace flipping through old photo albums, Emma paused on a picture of Alexander's mother. She looked so much like him, same piercing gaze, same quiet strength. "Tell me about her," Emma said softly, tracing the edge of the photograph. Alexander hesitated, his expression softening. "She was extraordinary, kind, patient, fiercely protective of those she loved. My father never appreciated her the way he should have, but she never let him dim her light." He smiled faintly, a bittersweet nostalgia coloring his tone. "Sometimes, I think she'd approve of you." Emma blushed, touched by the sentiment. "Do you think she'd understand us?" All of this, he nodded without hesitation. She always believed that love could conquer anything, even fear. Their conversation shifted to lighter topics, but the mention of Alexander's mother lingered in Emma's mind. That night, as she lay awake beside him, she realized something important. Fear would always exist, it was part of life, but letting it dictate their choices would mean giving their enemies power over them, and that was something neither of them was willing to do. The turning point came unexpectedly during a charity gala hosted by Grant Industries. The event was a celebration of the company's resurgence, attended by dignitaries, business leaders, and media outlets eager to document the remarkable turnaround. Emma accompanied Alexander, wearing a gown borrowed from Margaret, who insisted it suited her perfectly. As they descended the grand staircase together, flashes of cameras illuminated the room, capturing the undeniable chemistry between them. During his speech, Alexander deviated from the prepared remarks, speaking directly to Emma. "There's someone I need to thank publicly tonight," he began, his gaze locking onto hers. "Someone who taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's facing it head-on. Someone who reminded me that success means nothing without love." His voice cracked slightly, drawing murmurs of admiration from the crowd. "Emma Carter, you saved me in ways I'll never be able to repay. Thank you." Tears welled in Emma's eyes as applause erupted around them. In that moment, surrounded by hundreds of witnesses, they reaffirmed their commitment to each other, not just privately, but openly. It was a declaration that left no room for doubt. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. After the gala, as they drove home under a starlit sky, Emma finally voiced what had been weighing on her heart. What if the note comes true? What if someone tries to hurt us again? Alexander reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Then we'll fight back. We've proven we can survive anything as long as we're together. Fear doesn't win, unless we let it." His words resonated deeply, settling something restless inside her. When they arrived home, they found another envelope slipped under the front door. This time, however, the contents were different. Inside was a single sheet of paper bearing a handwritten message. Asterisk, "You've won. Be happy." Asterisk, though unsigned, the handwriting matched the previous notes. Whoever had orchestrated the attacks had conceded defeat, or perhaps had seen enough to know they couldn't break what had grown so strong. Relief washed over them, tempered by gratitude for the journey that had brought them here in the months that followed. Life settled into a rhythm of peace and purpose. Emma enrolled in online courses to finish her degree, pursuing a career in social work inspired by her experiences. Alexander continued leading Grant Industries with integrity, earning accolades for his transformational leadership. Together they traveled, explored new hobbies, and embraced simple joys they'd once taken for granted. Their story became a testament to the power of resilience, trust, and unconditional love. People often asked how they managed to overcome such adversity, and their answer was always the same: we chose each other. It wasn't about avoiding storms, it was about weathering them together. And so, as they stood hand in hand on the balcony overlooking the city, watching the sunrise paint the skyline in hues of gold and pink, they knew they'd found something rare and beautiful. A love that wasn't perfect, but real. A future that wasn't guaranteed, but worth fighting for.